Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a breaking edition of the Bengal Tiger podcast. I'm Billy Embody. With me, Matthew Brune, a man who's been on the road covering LSU women's basketball's national championship run. We'll have much more on that on the podcast later in the week, of course. But look, Matty B, we are here to discuss Vanderbilt transfer forward Jordan Wright, a Baton Rouge native, who announced on Wednesday afternoon now
Wednesday, Billy, Wednesday.
that he is going to be taking his talents back to his hometown. The former Dunham School native the former Dunham School standout announced the news on Wednesday. This is a big pickup for LSU, guy who's got a lot of SEC experience. What say you, Matty B?
Yeah, 6'6" wing / guard. Comes off of 4 straight years of playing at Vanderbilt, not just being there. Has played in 124 games. We're talking about a guy that played 16.6 minutes per game as a freshman, and it's only went up from there. Really, pretty streaky as a scorer. Up and down. I think he scored 15 plus in 6 of his last 8 games at Vanderbilt. But then obviously there's sprinkled in 0-point games, 6-point games, so on and so forth. In the year, averaging 10.5 points as a senior this year, shooting 40% from the field, 31% from 3. So there is some room to grow, but I think it was summarized best. And the reason why this team really needed a guy like him is if you watched Jerry Stackhouse, the way he talked about Jordan Wright, getting emotional from what Jordan Wright meant to that program at Vanderbilt because of, the foundation that was set. He was there with Stackhouse throughout all those 4 years, those first 4 years. And so I think you're getting a guy that not only knows the SEC, but knows how to build a winning culture, to build a program. And Vanderbilt obviously had their breakthrough season this past year, coming in, I believe, 5th or 6th in the SEC, and almost making the tournament. So you get a guy who is experienced, who can score the ball, who gives you guard versatility at 6'6". I've been saying that they needed more length on the perimeter. You get that with him. Overall, I think it's just a really, really good pickup and someone that they needed. And obviously, bringing a guy back to Louisiana from out of state we saw that work with Brian Kelly. It's a little bit harder in basketball, obviously, but they're going to take their swings at former or past people from LSU.
Yeah, I like this pickup as well. I mean, Jordan Wright's a guy that got a little bit of LSU interest as a recruit. I've known him 6 years now. It's crazy to kind of look back as Will Wade and his staff were kind of evaluating him, dipping their toe in recruiting him, but ultimately never going after him. And I think he's a guy that, they ultimately should have. You never know how a career, could have gone or whatever if he would have ended up at LSU with some of the talent that Will Wade was bringing in. But I love this SEC experience. I mean, a guy who really fits, kind of the Brian Kelly mold, character off the court, certainly brings, the very nice Vanderbilt degree to the LSU basketball team now. But he is, a 1-year plug and play guy. Whether he factors in, as a starter or coming off the bench remains to be seen. But a double-digit, point producer in the SEC back-to-back years. This past year, I think, was, kind of that really turning the corner for him. This year, he kind of dropped off a little bit after Scottie Pippen left. But this is a really nice pickup. I think this is a very good start for Matt McMahon and his staff.
Yeah, for those listening, maybe aren't completely, basketball, or maybe, obviously maybe didn't watch Vanderbilt this year. I kind of compared this to like the Jarek Bernard Converse pickup on the football side of things, whereas you're getting, Bernard Converse was an all-conference player at the Big 12, so maybe not that big of a splash, but a guy who can come in, fill a role for you, experience, one-year player, can obviously set the culture. I just kind of compare it to that in a lot of ways. Whether Wright starts or not, I don't know. I think it's an interesting situation they're in because we don't know who else they're going to bring in. I still think they need a point guard, which, they're in the market for. Maybe they need another big, which we've talked about on the site if y'all are subscribers, you've seen it there. So maybe he is the only like 6'6", 6'7" type guy they add, but they need more of those. They need Tyrell Ward, who's 6'6", 6'7". You get those two as like some nice wing players. Imani Wilkinson is back at this moment. So you have those three who can kind of rotate the three. and just give you some more size. They were just so small last year on the perimeter with Justice Hill and Cam Hayes and Trey Hannibal and even Adam Miller at 6'3". Defensively, they weren't able to get into people like they could. And I think Wright, we've talked about his scoring a lot, but he's a good defender, and he can kind of help a guy like Tyrell Ward kind of settle in, take some pressure off of him, because we know how good Tyrell Ward can be. But that's kind of how I look at it overall.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I think with Jordan Wright, I mean, his size, I mean, he's kind of built like a really tall linebacker, kind of an edge rusher in a way.
Yeah.
Just has like wide shoulders. So just a big guy to put out there on the perimeter for LSU now. And again, I like the pickup. I think when you look at what they need, you mentioned point guard, you mentioned a big man. I think those are things that they're after in the portal. And we touched on that in tidbits. You and I have been working the phones the last really week or so, trying to track some things down. And those are things they're going after. I think one guy that we circle, we talk about Louisiana natives as we kind of look at maybe what's next. I would love to see them bring Jalen Cook back, and I think it's a real possibility. He's a Tulane transfer now. He started his career at LSU under Will Wade, and ended up going to Tulane and put together back-to-back All AAC seasons for himself, and has really grown into a very reliable point guard, and played at a really high level for a Tulane team that once again kind of rebuilt, with Ron Hunter there, and really has put together a nice run under him. And so I think as you look to what's next, Jalen Cook might not be next necessarily because he is testing the NBA draft waters, but he's another one that when you look at Louisiana guys with ties to LSU and to the area, I think Jalen Cook would be a nice pickup.
Yeah, like you said, he'll go through the NBA draft process and stuff, kind of see where he stands, where he needs to improve. That's what a lot of these players are doing at this point, because they do have the option, obviously, to come back after they do declare for the draft. That's why you see a lot of players kind of doing both, having their foot in both lanes. But the draft process will take some time. I think Jalen Cook would be a tremendous addition, obviously, for anybody who's watched him. I mean, we're talking about a guy who averaged 20 points per game this year, shot 37% from three, and was just really, really good in the American, as Tulane was the second or third best team in the conference, third best team this past year in the conference. So would be a huge pickup. There are going to be a ton of teams all over him. I think, from, us talking to the sources and everything throughout the team, it's obviously far from a lock at this point, but they feel like they're in a good position for him when he does come back from the NBA draft stuff. But he will have plenty of suitors over the coming weeks and months. So that'll be an interesting. That will be kind of the one. If they can get Jalen Cook, that would kind of turn things, and then you can start looking ahead to be like, okay, how can we set expectations for this team moving forward? I think if you get a guy like Jalen Cook, you can start being like, all right, we saw what Missouri did under first year coach last year. We saw Mississippi State even have a pretty good year, so on and so forth. So I think you can start building expectations if you can land a guy like Jalen Cook. Because Jordan Wright, like I said, really, really solid player. He's not going to be an all-conference, all-SEC player. Jalen Cook could have that potential in theory. And so they're going to need a couple big swings here and there, even though we like the pieces they have on this team now. You need a lead guard, and that's what Cook would bring if they could get him.
Yeah, they also have been involved with Amari Abram from Ole Miss, who again, talking about guys with lots of suitors. He's somebody that played a good bit for Ole Miss as a freshman, and with the coaching change, is looking to maybe have a next stop. He is leaving the door open to return to Ole Miss, but LSU's been heavily involved there. Houston, Memphis, Maryland, a bunch of other schools have been poking around on him. So LSU is going to push there. Ronnie Hamilton is a former Ole Miss assistant and helped recruit Amari Abram over there. So he's somebody that is on LSU staff that could, really push there. And then, On3, Joe Tipton broke the news that BJ Mack is going to be at LSU this weekend. He's Wofford transfer. Talk about big guys, 6'8", 245. He's got a whole slew of visits set. You can check that out in our tidbits on the Bengal Tiger. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, there's still a few hours left, $1 for a month to jump on board for that first month. So check that out and subscribe to thebengaltiger.com. But BJ Mack would be somebody that if they could swing him, would also be, an upgrade in the front court and certainly bring some physicality and size.
Yeah, he released his top 5 of Arkansas, LSU, Alabama, South Carolina, and Iowa. So obviously, you get him on campus. He does not seem like he's in any rush at this point. I believe he went from top 10 a couple weeks ago to now top 5, and probably have a top 3 after the visits and so on. So it will be a process, but that is one we've heard of a few guards, right? Like we've heard of Cook and Abrams and a couple of other guards that they were after. Mac is really one of the only forwards that they've been linked to, seriously at this point. And obviously that can change within a day or two. But at this point, there's a lot of chips, I think, on Mac making a push for him and trying to get him in and kind of be that KJ Williams replacement. Obviously, you're not going to get a direct replacement for how good KJ was, but if you can get BJ Mack and get him to be 80% of KJ Williams with the improved backcourt that you're going to have, just so that way there's not so much pressure on BJ Mack. I think that would be a really, really good pickup. So I think you laid it out well with those targets. That's kind of where you start. The interesting thing to me is I don't know if any more players from LSU go into the portal. That's the whole thing, and they're all working out together right now. So they already had their meetings. Obviously, we saw 4 players leave within a 3-day span or whatever it was. Do any more leave? And that's going to be the interesting thing to me, because that would, in theory, open up a spot for another player or two that they, to get to that 13 number that they're after.
Yeah, and I think the basketball portal window runs until May 1st. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. For those of you listening on the football side of things, that window for football was moved up from May 1st to April 15th. So that's about to get hot and heavy. We'll have to bring the transfer portal podcast back right after the spring game. Yeah, or right before the spring game, I should say. But LSU is, I think, in a position where now that they've had this year and it wasn't up to anyone's expectations, they really know. I think they have a good grip on who's coming back and who's going to stay versus who could leave. And now they can address needs. Obviously, things are very unpredictable with the portal, so we don't necessarily know for sure everyone's going to lock in and stay. But I think the staff knows what they need to do as far as addressing it. You can turn things around quickly in college basketball. I mean, Dan Hurley middled in mediocrity his first year at UConn, and that is a pressure cooker up there. And they turned it around and obviously just won a national championship. So it can be done. They have a lot of work to do to obviously get to that level. But Maddie B, give me one takeaway on what you feel like is the key to turning this team around.
We already talked about kind of the positions that they need and all that stuff. I think more than anything, they need kind of an alpha in a sense. And that might sound weird because they are all, 20-plus-year-old men and they've been playing basketball for a long time. But this past year, I'll never forget, we'd had a couple press conferences with McMahon before the season. He was like, I'm still waiting. He said he was still waiting on a leader to like emerge. He was still waiting on kind of that vocal presence, because you look at the team last year and it's a lot of quiet guys. Like KJ Williams was the best player, but he was pretty quiet. Like Adam is mostly a quiet guy. You go down the list and there was not a lot of vocal leaders, like alphas type personalities. And, not saying that they had to be, jerks or anything like that, but it just didn't feel like a team that was going out of their way to really force each other to be better at times. And, that's going to be interesting to see whoever they bring in from the transfer portal. I mean, Jordan Wright's a guy, like I said, who comes in knowing what it takes to build a program at Vanderbilt. 4 straight years there, and they finally had this breakthrough year where they were 5th or 6th in the SEC and a really good year, and had, Stackhouse was over there crying because of how good of a season they had and how much Jordan Wright meant to them. So you get him. You want guys like that can really come in and be like, no, we are getting this thing back on track. And that's going to be an interesting thing to me, because now, like you said, the staff has a year under their belt. They know what they need. They know what they're doing. And I think McMahon, more than anything else, because some of these other assistants have some experience at high levels. McMahon, coming from Murray State, I think it was an eye-opening experience, and what kind of players you're going to need in the SEC. You got to have some dogs, man. It is a eat a dog eat dog world in the SEC.
That means LSU needs to find an Emmett Williams, in my opinion, bring him back into the fold. That was about as alpha as it got out
There
there
you go.
on the floors. Somebody to really fire the guys up and get after him a little bit too. And look, I mean, I think when you bring in a leader like Jordan Wright, that's what you would hope. I mean, that's a piece to the puzzle, I think, in terms of evaluating him as far as a guy they wanted to bring back. That type of leadership could go a long way. And look, I mean, sometimes bringing in a new coach can lead to an instant turnaround. We saw it with Jerome Tang. We saw it with multiple coaches. We see it every year. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So we'll see kind of how they continue to address needs in the portal and who they can get. But this is a staff that does, I think, just based on our conversations with various sources, like has a good grip on what they need and where they need to address those deficiencies from last year.
Yeah, I just want to throw in there too, so to maybe LSU fans that are hesitant, like, oh, they added portal players last year and they didn't work out. This is a very, very different situation here because you look at the portal players they added from last year's team. It's 3 Murray State players, right? KJ Williams obviously being the only one of those that was capable of starting and being a reliable player. Then you had Cam Hayes, who ended up being a good player, but NC State player off the bench. Got benched his second year to a degree. Derek Fountain, Mississippi State bench player. Like you're bringing in players that have some experience, but they are nowhere near the level of a Jordan Wright, of the level of a Jalen Cook, of even Amari Abrams. Like those players just bring a different energy to them. And we hoped Adam Miller was going to be that last year, but he wasn't. And that's my whole thing is that's why it kind of felt like a weird mix of pieces. And that's, anybody who looked at this roster was like, this is a really, really just thrown together team. And the staff knew that. And so now you go into this year saying, all right, we know what we need. We're going to get a guy like Jordan Wright. We're going to try to get a lead guard. We're going to go try to get a guy like BJ Mack. These are highly touted players here. This is not what they were getting last year.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that it'll help them find a better identity as a team.
Yeah.
Find a groove, because that was something that, as you watched LSU basketball this past year, I mean, they didn't get much of a groove overall, but
It's not a groove.
it was just all over the place.
Yeah.
So bouncing back from a really difficult season, especially in the SEC run, is going to be a tall task. But they got a good start with Jordan Wright, so we'll continue to track it on thebengaltiger.com. Please subscribe to the site. Again, $1 for a month. It ends Wednesday night. So if you're listening to the pod, jump on it. And also you can get your free Bengal Tiger Founders Club hat. Had a few people reach out and get those over to them just this week. So plenty more of those hats to go around. So jump on that. Please keep subscribing to the YouTube channel. Now over 3,400 of you guys who have subscribed. Appreciate all the support on that front. For Matty B, I'm Billy Embody. Shay Dixon and I will have the recruiting podcast on Thursday, if you're wondering. So be sure to check in on that. Lots to run down on the football side of that as well. So appreciate you guys listening. Enjoy your Masters week if you're into that as well.
You celebrate it.
Yeah, exactly. Keep the celebration rolling from the Women's National Championship into Masters week. So for Matthew Brune, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening.